Okay, guys, welcome to day 19, 20, and 21. We're going to look at the Pythagorean theorem. They have some triangles up here. They're not quite right triangles yet because they don't have a little indicator, which is this little box down here. That little box is going to tell you that this is a right triangle. Otherwise, you can't just assume it's a right triangle. So that little box right there tells you what you need to know. And we have our little formula for the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. The c squared is always here. The a and the b, you're going to notice there's a plus there. They can be a little mixed up. So the a side can be here and here, AB, or here you could have the b or the a. Now, the important part is the hypotenuse, or the c side, the hypotenuse. So what's nice here, I have a little arrow that's being built by this box that shows an arrow pointing to the c side. And that always is there. C side, the hypotenuse is the longest side. It is longer than A or B. A and not A plus B, but A is longer than A and it's longer than B. Same thing here. Now, if you want to do the little guy theory here, you got a little guy, he's got his arms, and these are his legs, because technically, those sides that are not the hypotenuse are the legs. So you have your guy, and the hypotenuse is the floor, which is the C right here. All right. If you don't like it, you got the arrow method. You've got the guy, that's the leg, that's the leg. The floor that he's standing on happens to be the hypotenuse. So however you choose to think about that in your head, there it is. I use the arrow method, so we'll be looking at the arrows when we do these. So let's look at number one. Now, 1, 2, and 3 are going to run exactly the same. They're going to be both legs. So the easiest thing here to do is I like doing this. There's my arrow. Bickety bam, my arrow points to my C side. Well, there's no number there, so I have the C. So I have 8 squared plus 11 squared equals C squared, because I don't have the C, so I need to make sure there's a C squared there. Well, what is 8 squared? That's 64. What's 11 squared? 121. Pop those in your calculator. 8 times 8, 11 times 11 if you don't have a square button. And then just add the two together. You got 5 there, 8, 185. I know what you're saying. Oh, we're done, Mr. Chavez. It says C. No, it says C squared. So we can't do that. Now, remember that if we had something added, we would always subtract it, right? And we'd subtract on both sides. Same thing if we had something multiplied. We would divide it. Same thing with subtraction. We'd add on both sides. Same thing with division. We'd multiply on both sides. Those are all opposite operations. We have that same thing going on here, but we have a square. So we need to know what is the opposite of a square. Well, that's the square root. Square root and squares and square roots are opposites of each other. Cube and cube roots are opposite, but we'll get to that later. So our square root and our square cancel off, and we're left with just that C. Now we need to look at the square root of 185, and I will need my trusty handy-dandy calculator here because I'm just not that good. So the square root of 185 equals, and it does come out to be a decimal, and you'll see that, and it's 13.601. All I care about is this tens place. So since it's 0, remember 0 to 4 keeps it the same, so 13.6. If it were 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 in this spot, you would jump that up to a 7. So the C side is 13.6. Now, C side must be larger than 8, and it must be larger than 11, and it is. So that is correct, because we have the C side. Number 2, we're going to look at the same thing. We're looking at the hypotenuse. How do we know that? We can look right here, and bickety bam, there's our arrow, which is made by that little block, and that's our C side. So we have 11 squared plus 7 squared equals C squared. Doesn't matter. Could you do it this way? Could you do 11 squared plus 7 squared? You sure could. I'm sorry, I just did the same way. 7 squared plus 11 squared. Yeah, either way is perfectly fine. But what has to be out here is the C side, which is indicated there. Either way is perfectly fine. All right, 11 squared is 121. 7 squared is 49. And nothing on c squared. Add those two together. We have, let's see, 10, 4, 6, 7, 170 equals c squared. And then we have to do its opposite. So we're going to square root both sides. The square and the square root are gone, left with our c. That's how we get there. And then we have to do the square root of 170. Square root 170 equals, and this one is 13.03, or 13 and 3/100. Well, we're going to go to there. That 3 is between 0 and 4, so this remains the same. It is just 13. You want to put the 0 there at 0.0, I don't care. Is it larger than 11? Yes, it is. Is it larger than 7? Yes, it is. It is the hypotenuse. Bam, done. That's that part. Now, this is going to run the same. Again, if we look at our little arrow thing here, or if we want to look at our guy, and that's his leg, that's fine. The floor is the C part. So we have 8 squared plus 10 squared equals C squared. Can you have 10 squared plus 8 squared? Sure you can, no problem. 8 squared is 64, 10 squared is 100, and 64 and 100, if we add it together, is 164, and we're going to square root. It runs the same way as long as we have these. And I'm going to do for you 1, 2, and 3 are going to be done this way, so make sure you take your notes. And then 4, 5, and 6 are going to be where we have a number for the square root and we're missing a leg. So you need to make sure you do this. So take the notes so you understand. The square root of 164. And the square root of 164 is 12 and 81/100. Because the c's, right, the square root and the square cancel each other off. And the 0 is going to simply, I'm sorry, we're going to the 8, but the 0 is going to make the 8 remain, so 12.8, or 12 and 8/100, or tenths. So 12 and 8/10. It is larger. It's the c side, so it's the hypotenuse. It needs to be larger than 10, and it is. It needs to be larger than 8, and it is. So that's correct. Now, if you come out with a number, 164, and you forget to square root it, is there any way if we have let's say these are inches, if there was an 8-inch side and a 10-inch side, is there any way if you did that in inches that you would have a 164-inch side? There's no way. You couldn't stretch 8 and 10 inches apart of each other to put 164 inches, so it has to be realistic. Okay, guys? Now, here's the part that confuses quite a few people, and it's okay, don't worry about it, we'll get there. Here is our arrow, and it is pointing right at 7. And I'm going to circle that because that is our C side. And note, I put it right there, and I immediately did that. Because I said I would look for it. Oh man, that is my hypotenuse. I need to make sure that's on the other side. What is this one over here? I don't care. It can be A or B. For me, because I read from left to right, and for me, it makes it normal. It makes it normal for me to say that that's the A, that's the B, just because it's sheer order. And it doesn't matter. So I would go 6 squared plus B squared. I'm going to make that the B side. This is the way I do it. 6 squared is 36 plus B squared. Make sure your B doesn't turn into a 6. And 7 squared is 49. And how are we looking at this? What number are we on? 4. Okay. So we're going to subtract 36 from both sides of the equation. And B squared, run my line here, B squared. And after we subtract that, we end up with 13. End up 13. Now, we still have B squared. We don't have what the B is. We want what B squared is. We're going to square root. So the difference in there was we have to subtract. So we add that one step on there. When we were adding, we had to add and then do the square root part. Whereas this time we have to subtract. We have to do a little algebra here, subtract that 36 from both sides and then square root. And you're going to see this. For 4, 5, and 6 are going to run the same way. So make sure you're taking these notes so you can use these side by side with your homework. for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, okay? All the same homework, just different numbers. So our square and square root are gone, that's B, and the square root of 13, square root of 13 is 3.60 or 3/10, because the 0 is going to keep it as 6, so 3.6. And I know what you're saying. You said, well, that's not bigger than the 7 or the 6. But that's a leg. It is a leg. It's not the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse still is larger than both the legs. It's larger than 3.6, larger than 6. Yes, 7 is. So that's perfectly fine. So that's where your mentality, your thinking has to come in. You have to start thinking now, oh crap, it's a leg. So it has to be smaller than the hypotenuse, and it is. So you're good. So start thinking that way here for these next two, that one and the next two here. Because once again, if I have my guy standing here, and that's his leg, and that's his leg, that is the floor, that's my hypotenuse. That needs to be on the C side. But I'm missing my A side or my B side, it doesn't matter. And we'll A squared plus 11 squared. It just flows that way for me. We have A squared left, and 11 squared is 121, and 13 squared is 169. Then we subtract 121 from both sides of the equation. A squared equals, and 1948. We're going to square root both sides. The square root and the square disappear. We have A equals, and the square root of 48 is 6.92 and onward, but the 2 is going to keep, because this is below 5, or it's, between 0 and 4, it's going to keep it as that. So it'll be 6.9 or 6 9/10. And we look at that 6.9 or 6 9/10. Is it smaller than the 13? Because remember, this is the hypotenuse now. Is it smaller than 13? Yes. Yes. So we're good. That's just a way to check to know what you're doing here. Once again, we're going to look. You can use the arrow method. I like the arrow method because I think that little box makes an arrow anyway. So 12 is our hypotenuse, so I'm immediately going to throw that out there. And 4 squared plus, well, that's our B. You can put it as A. I really don't care. Some people like to always put the number here and leave their variable first. Some people like the variable second. It's just whatever you prefer. Me, it's in order. A squared, B squared. It's just the way it is for me. Don't forget your square on top of your B there. 4 squared is 16. We're going to get to the B squared in a little bit. 12 squared is 144. And we will subtract 16 from both sides of the equation. B squared equals 128. Yeah. So we will go ahead and do the square root on both sides. B equals, and the square root of 128. $11.31. The 1 is going to keep the 3 the same, so 11 3/10. 11 3/10. Is it smaller than 12? Yes, it is. Is it smaller? Is 4 smaller than 12? Yes. The 2 legs are smaller than the 12. So you're good. We're perfectly fine there. So remember, I'm going to have a Zoom meeting at 9 and at 1:30 if you guys want to jump in. I don't care. But the point being is, if you don't understand this, you need to make sure that you Zoom with me. Because if you don't Zoom with me and you're doing these wrong, you're not going to get the points that you deserve on these. I'm not giving out great amounts of points. If your paper doesn't look like this, what you're doing doesn't look like this, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So if 6 doesn't look like 6, who cares about the numbers? The numbers could be different. The triangles could be different, but your numbers need to look like your numbers. 1, 2, and 3 are going to look exactly the same. You're going to have both legs. So you have the A and the B side. 3, 4, and 5, 4, 5, and 6. So 1, 2, and 3, you'll have both the A and the B. For 4, 5, and 6, you will have one of the legs and the hypotenuse. So like this. Make sure that that's what you're doing and you're checking it out. So make sure that you zoom. You don't zoom. I don't know what to tell you guys. If you don't understand this, try to get your days and nights put back together. You guys are getting up and staying up all night long, and you're sleeping all day long, and it's messing everything up. All your teachers work from 8 in the morning to 3 at night in the afternoon, and we're not going to be doing a lot of things late. I have on special occasions, but we're trying not to do it. So see you later. Take care. Be safe.